Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing a review, which I haven't done in a very long time, but I feel that this kind of needs its own review, and not a lot of people are talking about it. I actually don't know anyone outside of my friend circle who really has read this book, and we're going to be talking about the book Docile, or Docile. This sort of came to my attention from Cheyenne. Admittedly, was not exactly coming to my attention for the reasons that are all the selling points. This is a science fiction, I would even call it a speculative fiction novel. It is commentary about capitalism and debt and classism. There's a lot of things. I don't have the kind of nuance to discuss these things as I would like, but go and read it, please. This comes highly recommended. This was a 4-star read, I believe. Also, before we really get into it, I need to give you a few content warnings because there are a lot of them for this novel. We have drugging, rape, suicide, abuse, specifically child abuse in a separate category. Technically, this is a book that includes slavery. We have touches upon mental illness, different types of portrayals of mental illness. There is grooming and there is torture. So if you do not want to hear about any of these things, please move on. I will be here to give you more happier updates in the future. But if these things are something that you can handle right now, this is a very good book that covers these things in a very nuanced way. I'm going to try to do a non-spoiler section and a spoiler section, but really in order to get through the non-spoiler section, I'm going to have to sort of push you in the direction towards a spoiler. This book really takes into consideration what the setup is and then takes it to its logical conclusion. I hesitate to say that this is a predictable book, but if you're thinking about these in a very thoughtful way, if you're thinking about the story and what is happening in the world in a very thoughtful way, there's really only a few ways that this could go, and this is the way that it does. So in that, the world of Docile is a future that is perhaps not so distant from us, that imagines trillionaires as the upper 1%, the top crust, as these flamboyant, very privileged, a very stylized people that honestly, in my mind, sort of remind me of what the capital was in the Hunger Games. There's a lot of colors, there's a lot of technology that not the rest of the country or the world has. There is such a wealth disparity between this trillionaire class and the rest of the population that they almost feel like they're sort of like White Tower type of people. And much in the Hunger Games, the lower classes, or the poor class, they are suppressed, but instead of using things like resources, food, punishments, the militant side, they are suppressed using debt. I know that like technically you could argue that there are a lot of similarities between them, but the way that it's implemented in this world versus the Hunger Games is very different, so I'm going to treat them as two separate things. In this world, debt is inherited through multiple generations and can accumulate to millions and millions of dollars. Debt can be paid off, but if you don't pay it on time, or if you can't pay the correct amount, you can go to debtor's prison, and the rest of your family is marked as people who are untrustworthy, who cannot pay their debts. Instead of having something like a credit score, it is literally marked on your body. However, as a way to erase debt, debt can be bought and sold through servitude. This is a very harsh way to pay off debt, but when your debt is in the millions, sometimes this is the only way for a family to get out of debt. However, it's not as simple as and nice and neat as what we would consider to be indentured servitude. The upper class is quite cruel to their servants or their dociles, and the time as a docile is made easier by this drug called Docilin or Dociline. The audiobook says Docilin, so I'm going to be using that term. This is a drug that makes the user forget all the stuff that has happened to them or that they have done while on the drug, as well as making them a perfect submissive individual. And the people, once they become a docile, once they've sold off their debt for servitude, dociles only have 7 rights, which makes them susceptible to a lot of abuse. And because they don't remember what they did or what happened to them, and they are essentially robots, you can see where this gets really shady really quickly, and it gets very disturbing very quickly. However, again, because of the mountain of debt and because of prisons and such and so forth, a lot of people choose to take this route, even if it's only selling themselves for a few years, because it's better for them to do whatever they're going to do on Docile rather than go to debtor's prison and create a worse environment for their families. Now, as I've already hinted, this is definitely where it gets into a BDSM type capacity, and go forth and let your mind run free, because that is essentially what happens for the first half of the book. We get introduced to our main protagonist, whose name is Elisha. He has been sold as a companion Docile to a man named Alex, who just so happens to be the grandson of the woman who created Docile, and he is the heir to that fortune. He is working for the company to make the next generation of the drug, and he has purchased a companion Docile because he's trying to prove himself to the company, to his family, for appearance's sake. Where this gets interesting, and also the reason why we are following these two in particular, is that Elisha has sold himself for a life contract, so he will never be free, and he has refused up front to take Docile. He wants to keep his mind. He wants to be able to be a human rather than just this yes sir machine. This is not going to work out for Alex because he doesn't want to put time and effort into essentially training a human to be the perfect companion, especially when Elisha is about to enter a world where he doesn't know all the rules and regulations and the courtesies, the traditions, as it were. Now, this is very hard for their relationship, not just because they're at odds, but because Elisha is being broken throughout the entire first half of this novel. I wouldn't say it is in a necessarily malicious way. Alex is not considered to be an evil person. He is a cog in a machine. Both of them are, really. They are part of a system and they don't realize it yet. Slowly through this sort of training and breaking process, the lines between, master and servant, between Alex and Elisha really start to blur. They do sort of fall in love. It's very heart-wrenching to watch, but also very sweet to watch them start to care for each other, start to sort of be in tune with what the other needs. Even though this setup and this relationship is not what either of them should have. I do have to pause here to remind everyone that when I said this was a sci-fi or a speculative fiction book, it is. I know I'm talking about this wonderful romance right now. Honestly, I would love to see Alex and Elisha, end up together. That's where I was at this point in the book. I loved their relationship. I loved them. Like, even if I had issues with Alex's decisions and what he thought and how he thought them, I was really rooting for them to overcome this and fall in love. This is not a romance in any way or shape or form. It has romantic elements, and it's heartbreaking when we realize that this is not a romantic story. And this is kind of where I have to break off from the non-spoiler section, because from here on we're going to be talking about what this book really, really is about, and why it was important to have the Act 1 where it looked like it was going to be a romance story versus the true heart of the book, which is in Act 2. And this is only a 2-act book, so here we go. If you are interested, if you want to read this book, please do. The audiobook was fantastic. Please go read it, come back. We will have a discussion in the second act. For those of you who don't care / want to go on, please stay. Again, we have this blooming love story, and Elisha is breaking. He is becoming a Docile, even if he's not taking Docile. And eventually, of course, Elisha and Alex sort of realize this, but it's more important for Alex to realize that he is not good for Elisha. There is a rape scene at about this time when he's trying to figure out and push Elisha to a point where he knows that he hasn't completely destroyed him. And unfortunately, what this rape scene proves is that Elisha allowed himself to be raped in order to please Alex. And this is horrible. This is terrible on all fronts. And this is the point. This is no longer love. This is abuse. Alex goes on. He releases Elisha from his service and sends him home, which is honestly the best thing that Alex could have done. He removed himself from Elisha's life because he didn't want that for this man that he thought he loved. That said, it was also possibly the worst thing that he could have done at the same time. Elisha's family, who is extremely poor, this place that he lives and the community is very, very poor. They don't have a lot of money, they live off the land, and everyone has to pull their weight. When Elisha comes back broken, unable to really even function as a human being, he can't dress himself, he can't do hard labor, he can't not be told what to do. His family doesn't really accept him anymore because he's useless. This is also where the mental health thing comes in, where he needs more help than ever in order to just remember who he is and try to fix himself, and no one is supporting him, least of all his father, who has already gone through this sort of thing once with Elisha's mother. This is also sort of where it gets interesting as far as the relationship between the big pharma, the creators and the labs that make Docile versus the reality and what happens gets highlighted. Elisha's mother sold herself for 10 years, and when she came back, even though she had not taken Docile for quite some time, the drug was still in her system to the point where she also cannot function as a human being. She is very eager to please, but she is not all there. Now, essentially having two useless individuals, Elisha's father will not and cannot support Elisha the way that he needs. As time goes on, and as Elisha's mental state gets worse and worse, he does attempt suicide. This is thankfully and very happily avoided. Elisha is taken out of his very toxic home environment, but he also can't stay with Alex. Alex's family, particularly Alex's father, is suing Elisha for slander, damages, and essentially all of the money that he sold off to Alex. So Act 2 is a complicated series of interpersonal relationships, even insofar as the minor characters and supporting characters to Elisha and Alex, giving them different perspectives on how this world works. We were given a very, very small, narrow view in Act 1, and now we're getting a more macro view of how this world really operates. Two of Alex's good friends, who also work for his lab and company, were sold as children to be Dociles, and there's a lot of questions that I have with that, but that are never fully explored or answered, and I'm actually kind of okay with this because of how dark and horrible this world can get. But the two of them have very different views on how Docile should be active and working in the world, and we see those. One of them works at the lab. She feels that if we're going to keep this drug going, then Docile should have a say in what is happening. The other end is that the friend is trying to undermine the system. This shouldn't happen at all, that we need a complete overhaul. And both of them are right in very different aspects. They've chosen to use their feelings towards this drug in very different manners. And this is where, it gets really interesting, because I can't remember the name of the activist docile rights group, but we get the story of Alex as a child essentially being attacked by this rights activist group because they were so extreme, and then we get them trying to help Elisha through this horrible, wretched, and long court case that he has no idea what he's doing or how to navigate it. They also do a lot of good. They help the poor communities. They make sure that people are clothed, that people are fed, that people have, places to go and sleep and be safe. Nothing is truly good and nothing is truly evil in this world, which is, again, it's really interesting and very nuanced. Ultimately, what this book becomes is a conversation between all aspects of a system. And that's really what this book is about, is looking at systems, why they are broken, why they work, what pressures people have to be under in order to make these kinds of decisions, from the individual who's trying to sell off their debt all the way to the top who allowed this kind of a system to exist in the first place. The conversations are not necessarily deep. We don't have a deep dive. We don't have all of the nuances and caveats, but we get the perspective enough where the conversation does happen. And that's more than I can say for most of the books that would take on this kind of a conversation. Docile takes a look at a system that is paved with intentions, just intentions. They're neither good nor bad. The good, bad, and the neutral all exist within every decision that is made, again, from beginning to end, from the highest power in this particular world all the way down to the lowest person who has literally no agency. These mechanisms are highlighted between all of our characters and how they have been brought up, how the system works on an individual's mind. I almost feel that there are some malicious but sympathetic characters in this novel, where by the very end, when the court case is over and Alex has lost pretty much his entire life's work and his family and his fortune, there are some characters that we could very easily hate, and yet, because of the way that we've experienced this world, you almost feel sorry for them, because, again, they were just a cog in this massive machine doing their part and not really being able to fight that mentality or that upbringing. Does that make them a good person? Absolutely not. But the feeling is much more nuanced than just I hate or I love. I really, really loved this book, but again, I have to remind you that even though you're going to go into this novel and you're going to just be absolutely enthralled in this love story, it is not a romance. It is not a love story. It is speculative fiction, and it is speculative fiction, honestly, I think at its best. We get thrown into this world that has so many problems in it, and then we get to see how this plays out to pretty much its logical end. I feel like this has a lot of good discussion moments without really being prescriptive about any one thing. We kind of get nuanced arguments about everything and everyone in this story. So you start to look at our world, our real life situation, and perhaps wonder, is there more to this thing that I'm passionate about? Am I in the right? Am I doing this for the right reasons, or am I following essentially the pattern and flow of what society tells me that I should? In a lot of ways, I feel that Docile explores the fact that regardless of how we feel about ourselves and how we feel about others, we have no agency. And that's a really interesting thing to sort of digest. I would definitely suggest that you read this understanding that there really is no happy ending. It is bittersweet at best, and it's optimistic. Dare I say it might be even a healthy ending. And despite all of the different trigger warnings that I said before, I think it handles them quite well. Honestly, this book does not shy away from trying to go through the recovery process of abuse, as well as dealing with a world that is set up for trauma. Again, 4 stars. I think honestly I would have given it a 5 if it weren't for a couple of things. I did kind of feel like that Act 1 into Act 2 was just such a hard switch. I needed a moment to like breathe and then adjust my expectations. There are, I don't even know if it's gratuitous sex scenes or gratuitous sexual violence necessarily. I think that it is necessary for what the story is trying to discuss, but it can be a bit much at times. That's not a bad thing, it's just my preference, and it sort of like turned me off to some of it sometimes. I still think this is a fabulous book. Would highly recommend you to read this. Please do. I think that's all. If you have read this, please tell me in the comments below. Tell me your thoughts. Did I miss anything? Especially if I missed a trigger warning. I was trying to like figure out everything after the fact, and there's a lot of things. Please tell me in the comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts. If you want to read it, please do. I want more people to read this. I think that it is an important book as far as a thought piece is concerned. So, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button and the notification bell down below if you haven't already for content that will be similar but better than this, and I will try to do more of these in the future, so look forward to that. Alright, see you. Bye.
She said it will never go away. I know there is nothing left to say. Can we try to hold on just for now, even if we don't know how to show them what we're all about?